Who's ready to win the day in sports? I know you are. Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com, Monday through Friday, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm Justin Fensterman, and let's break everything down from a fantasy sports perspective. What is going on, everybody? My name is Justin Fensterman, and welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily here on the Elite Plus Network, powered by FantasyGuru.com, where you can find my work, the good old FG, FantasyGuru.com. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Fensty Sports, Fensty Sports. Also in our Discord at FantasyGuru.com at Fensty, Fensty. Also hanging out on TikTok too. A lot of compliments coming in from everyone in the Elite Mafia regarding my shirt today. I put out whenever I'm doing shows these pre-show videos and everything like that. Let me move the camera down just a little bit here so you can see that. And Nintendo 64. I'm a big fan of nostalgia. And I feel like a lot of sports fans are, because there's a lot of history behind it. But just in general, nostalgia, the 1990s, the early 2000s, might have something regarding that a little bit down the road, a little Easter egg for all of you. I know Easter's over. I get it. I understand. Don't be so literal out there. Going to be talking a little bit today about the wide receiver position as I continue to fill in for Ray Flowers. Normally, though, I'm on this stream every single Wednesday, so this is my regularly scheduled day. Ray Flowers off for the week. So make sure you check out previous episodes from the week where I talked all about running backs on Monday with Tyler Beaker. Yesterday, Tuesday's edition, talked about tight ends with Armando Marsal. Well, the Bosco, Rich Maletto, is going to stop by to talk about some wide receivers that we can look to target in our fantasy football drafts. I want to remind everybody that because this is a free stream and you don't necessarily have to be part of the Elite Mafia in order to catch Fantasy Sports Daily, Monday through Friday, noon Eastern, you could sign up, become part of the Elite Mafia. We have many fantasy football or even football packages that you can purchase right now. You see the link right here. And we have a season-long solo package where you get everything season-long that we have to offer. All of the articles that we have to offer, access to season-long Discord channels in our Discord, which is large as hell. We are here for you with a multitude of analysts, a betting package that you could get solo if you're just into wagering. I'm seeing bets go up right now in our Discord from Tyler Beaker, ready to go, some futures there. So you make sure you get on that right now. DFS, for those that love just the DFS game, you can get a package for DFS that's solo, or you bundle them all together for just under $400, and you get everything we have to offer: season-long betting, DFS, Discord access throughout, live streams to MLB for the rest of the season too. If you fancy yourself a baseball fan, big baseball week, by the way. The trade deadline is looming, a couple of days away. And I know a lot of you are used to hearing, by the way, baseball content throughout the week. Well, here's a little bit of baseball news that we have here with the Yankees adding Austin Slater. Whoopity-doo. We'll see if that becomes anything. But seeing teams like the Astros still making some calls regarding some potential hitters. I've heard them linked to even Nolan Arenado. So we'll have to see if the Astros, who are looking to add, end up adding something else. Also, little injury news right here is I was kind of someone who was waiting on the Braves to really start surging. But since the start of the season, if you even look at the Atlanta Braves starting rotation, all injured. Acuna now hurt, going to be missing a few weeks too. Not good in the dog days of the MLB, but sometimes your team's just hurt. The Braves have had that problem here for the last couple of years. So we'll have to see what ends up happening with Atlanta and how it impacts them moving forward. It makes the wild card, well, I don't want to say more open or anything like that, but that dogfight that would be going on in the NL East if Atlanta was fully healthy. Eventually, not this year, but eventually a few years from now, you got to think the Washington Nationals will be there too. All right. That fulfills the baseball quota of the week, the baseball Max. Where's my baseball? Where's Ray? When's he coming back? Relax. He'll be back next week. You'll get your baseball fix a little bit more. But for now, continuing to get you ready for your fantasy football drafts. And just so you know out there, when it comes to wide receiver coverage, I'm going to talk about some players that I'm seeing moving and shaking up and down draft ranges. I'm going to talk about auction values too. And this is the position This is it. You want to talk about where you get your value? If you go stars and scrubs, you spend 40 plus on 3 different guys, $200 budget. You spend at least $120 there. You only have 3. You need 13 more spots to fill. Well, I'm going to talk about some receivers that you could get for $1. A lot more value in those fantasy football auctions than you think. Speaking of that, by the way, tomorrow, because of the skill positions, we've already done running backs. We've already done tight ends. We're doing wide receivers today. And then on Friday, I'm going to do quarterbacks. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an extra auction strategy session. Check out episode number 449 of Fantasy Sports Daily. One I did last week. It was more your introductory episodes to fantasy football auctions, something I love. I don't want to say I specialize in them. I just play in a lot of them. And I've learned a lot of lessons over the years that I'm hoping that you all out there spend the extra time to be in an auction so you can get the players you want without being stuck at a specific draft spot in the snake. So that's why I'm going to be talking about it. By the way, you can find more of my content at fantasyguru.com regarding auctions. Ray and I tag team, Ray Flowers and I tag team auction coverage there. So again, yeah, it's a little bit more time. Yeah, you got to be a bit more engaged than in a snake draft, I guess, although I'm always engaged in my drafts. Yeah, it's hard to go away and go to the bathroom if you have to go number 2, let's just say, and you can't do it in less than 3 minutes. I understand that. Going away from the auction, it's very, very tough, but it gives you more control over your team's destiny. So tomorrow, I'm going to kind of go over the more advanced, I want to say, AP Calc. Let's just say last week's was more the finite math, which yours truly was always in. Now for all you smarties out there, AP Calc style coverage for auctions tomorrow. So I'm going to break that down and go over bidding strategies, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Kyle gets it. Kyle enjoying salary cap drafts. And by the way, auctions also known as salary cap drafts, especially if you're looking at Yahoo and you're like, hey, I see snake draft, I don't see auction or anything like that. These sites will refer to them as salary cap drafts. So that's where you find your auctions right there. It's a lot of fun. It's a nice rush to the head. A lot of adrenaline with fantasy football auctions. But what's so good about auctions are the value and how it can change, and how rather than focusing on average draft position, it's more of a price range. So it gives you more of open thinking on how to construct your roster. And there's no set value for certain players. Obviously, your big time names, your Jamar Chases of the world, you might be spending close to 70 on that. I don't know if I would, but if you want the best of the best, you're going to have to spend those high prices on the Jamar Chases of the world. I'm thinking that he's going to be going in a lot of your auctions with a $200 budget for about $65 to $70. Very few players will go for that much. He is one of them, though. He absolutely is. So that right there with Kyle's comment there, and you could catch all of our content by signing up, become part of the Elite Mafia for the 2025 fantasy football season. Let's talk about what's coming up on the agenda before Rich Maletto joins me in just a little bit here. Want to go over what I look for and what we have to offer, by the way, on the site too, because we do have articles surrounding focuses in certain areas when it comes to whether or not we should be drafting certain wide receivers. But just going over a couple of pieces of news here. Malik Neighbors here, we know he's nursing the sore shoulder. Doesn't seem to be serious. We should be okay there. Justin Jefferson, this one's interesting because you could have Kevin O'Connell and you could have the Vikings be like, he's fine. He'll be all right with that hamstring. He'll just sit out and not practice or do anything until the start of the season. Where have we heard that before? I'm not saying that all of a sudden this is going to be a Christian McCaffrey like situation or anything like that. But it does make things interesting that we've heard this and we've been through this whole song and dance before. I'm not saying don't draft Justin Jefferson or we should worry if he has to miss a week or two. But, I mean, the whole optimism of they should be ready for week 1. He should be fine, but he's not going to do any work leading up to it. That's more that I'm looking to see just how bad the hammy injury is or if it's just soreness. So we'll have to actually see how things go over the next few weeks, but I'm not dropping them down any of my draft targets. I'm very intrigued by the Vikings, actually, because the thing with the Vikings and there's a lot of encouragement surrounding what J.J. McCarthy brings, but we didn't see him last year. We don't know how he's going to respond or anything like that. Guys that you're paying actual capital for. When I say actual draft capital, I'm talking about, I used to think it was like the 8th round, but I'll say this, 6th round or earlier to me is true actual draft capital. 7th, 8th round is right on the periphery right there. But ultimately, when I'm talking about actual draft capital, I'm talking about 6th round or below. Obviously, you're looking at Justin Jefferson in that 6th pick area. So I wouldn't stop him just there, because remember, good receivers do it. I know it's a lot about the quarterback being able to reach the certain receiver, but good receivers are able to help make their quarterbacks better too. And an example that I can point out from that is Jalen Hurts, because with Jalen Hurts' accuracy issues that he had for the first, if not the first year, the first couple of years, he then gets A.J. Brown, a much better target. A.J. Brown able to do his own work, making sure he could get open. And I'm not saying that he's the only reason. Hurts naturally improved as well, getting more seasoned on the professional level. But having someone like A.J. Brown, to me, there was a correlation with the accuracy improving, and it very much improved a couple of years ago once he got A.J. Brown. So there are, and that's why, even though the quarterback situation is very strange, we wouldn't be seeing them go on average, even whether it's in some of these experts leagues or not. If they were that concerned with J.J. McCarthy, we wouldn't be seeing Justin Jefferson go as early as he is. So again, I'm not going crazy with just dropping him because of this injury or anything like that. We know how deadly he could be. The Najee Harris situation, we all knew, oh, he's going to be fine. Only hurt his eyes in a fireworks incident. No matter what happened there in the fireworks incident, we still don't know what the deal is. And the problem is with this, and I don't want to even say it's a problem, but for those that like getting Amari and Hampton in that 6th round, well, guess what? Now with this, the less information we get about Najee Harris and the more consistent information that we get, the more inconsistent information, then that's going to drive up Amari and Hampton's value. And I was loving where he was going before, but now I'm starting to wonder if we keep not getting info over the next few weeks and we're not really seeing him too much out there, then is that going to move him up to the 4th round? And remember, he's on a team that has strong protection and they're going to run the hell out of the ball. I was liking both of these guys, both Harris and Hampton, and I still do. And yes, that's going to be a situation where you're investing in the RB unit and you're going to have to spend a little bit more than, hey, you're going to draft your 3 down back here in the first 3 rounds. And then you make sure you overdraft the handcuff by a round or 2. This is an actual investment, and some of these backfields are. So now that we're still not getting much up of an update on Harris there, we're going to start to see that move up a little bit. Isaiah Likely dealing with a fractured foot here. Another one, we don't know at first. It's he's only going to miss a couple of weeks, and that's it. Now it's starting to look like here he's going to be missing some time leading into the season. So I wonder how it will impact the Baltimore Ravens. And when it comes to, Andrews, this and that, and not too much right there. I need him to block a little bit more. But yeah, Isaiah Likely, I don't see him. Is he likely to start the season active? Nah, not that part right there. So want to welcome everybody in who is hanging out with me. Want to say hi, what's going on, Angelo, as always, and Kyle, too, hanging out with me here on a Wednesday, your wacky Wednesday edition of Fantasy Sports Daily here. And Kyle actually has a question here. 12-team PPR Draft Monday. 10th spot here, Genty London Wilson. Okay, was happy with that start. 4th wide receiver was Hunter. 5th was Egbuka. So this is interesting right here. Egbuka, one of the things I've noticed about Tampa Bay, and with the health questions going in there with Tampa Bay, Egbuka, I am seeing move up a lot more when it comes to draft boards. And he's actually one of the players I notice, and I don't look at the exact average draft position. I just look for a range. If I all of a sudden start seeing somebody that I'm seeing being drafted solidly in the 9th round, let's just say, all of a sudden in a 4-week span, even a 3-week span, shift up a couple of rounds, then yeah, that's something that I'm going to absolutely take into consideration. Kyle asked me about Egbuka versus McMillan here, and yes, they drafted him, and they're going to be able to utilize him. My bigger concerns with Tampa Bay at this point surrounds Tristan Wirfs being hurt. because that's a major amount of protection that Baker Mayfield is losing, and he's going to need some time to get that ball out. So could be a little bit of a struggle early on with Wirfs out. So that's not stopping me from looking at Mike Evans where he's going, especially Egbuka too. I like that 7th, 8th, 9th round area of taking shots on some of these rookie wide receivers. And if you look at the amount of weapons that Tampa Bay has, it's not too bad there. They're not completely loaded. So that's why, for me, I'm fine with not only going Egbuka with where he's going, starting to see him move up a little bit, but looking at that Tampa Bay team. But am I going to have multiple shares of these Buccaneers guys? Probably not. Probably not. I'll probably at least have one share blanketing the team a little bit. I'll get a Bucky Irving, and then I will look at Mike Evans in about the 4th, 5th round area is where I'm seeing him go. And then, we'll have to see what the deal is with Godwin, of course. Not much capital for him. But then Egbuka going where he's going, starting to move up. I've noticed in the last few weeks he's moved up at least a full round in 12-team leagues. And something I should have probably mentioned, and I mentioned this yesterday right off the top of the show, is that when I'm analyzing these boards and when I'm analyzing especially these wide receivers, I know that there are some of you that play in standard leagues, but there are a majority of you that play in PPR. And I don't want to say the overwhelming, because there are a lot of you out there that still play with the same rules that you played in 1989. But for me, when analyzing these players, I try to come up with a happy medium. So it's really, when I'm looking at these receivers, I'm thinking about it from a half PPR perspective. So that's a little bit with the news too. And also you can ask your questions in the comments too, and I will get to a few of them there. So Kyle and Angelo, and to all of you hanging out with me today, thank you very much. The big thing with receivers, especially when investing, is looking at that target share right there. And there's someone who I haven't been talking about too much that I'm loving that's going in that early 2nd round area. And when I'm looking at some of the others besides Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson going up on a little bit earlier, I love where CeeDee Lamb is going. I've ended up with CeeDee Lamb a lot in best ball, I've noticed. And by the way, the Cowboys now with Dak Prescott healthy, I'm loving CeeDee Lamb and Pickens both. Blew a little bit later on, like half the world. It seems like I'm a Cowboys fan, but they've got a lot of appealing fantasy options. And beyond Lamb, of course, who requires that 1st round pick, very affordable options from the Dallas Cowboys here. But there's a lot to like, and this is why I have no problem passing on some of these running backs. I want Bijan Robinson. I want Barkley. Of course, I want both of them. But when I'm looking at the opportunity to get Lamb and Neighbors, especially when I'm in the snake in the middle of that 1st round, I'm on Ross St. Brown. I don't want to say people are turned off. I don't care Ben Johnson leaving or not. It doesn't matter. This guy is going to get fed, and he's going to be especially targeted in that red zone too. Puka Nacua is where, so far, I don't want to say I've just intentionally passed, but I find myself wanting Davante Adams a little bit later on. And we all at Fantasy Guru, by the way, have differences of opinions. And I was listening to the Elite Sports Show on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio yesterday. Jeff Manns hosts that. And Jeff talked about Davante Adams and gave a big-time focus on Davante Adams and the expectations. Is the ceiling there? Does his ceiling fully depend on whether or not Puka Nacua gets hurt? And Jeff is not as into Davante Adams. And for me, I'm more into him. And again, my expectations being a little bit lower there, and him being on a new team, it's really hard to chase last year. Also, his age, he's becoming a seasoned veteran, but we know he's able to get himself open. Quarterback play, does he need full-on quality in order to be successful? That's kind of why I was talking about with Justin Jefferson, because even though we're in a little bit of the unknown regarding J.J. McCarthy, we know Justin Jefferson will be okay. I think Davante Adams will be okay, but the thing is with Adams, if I'm sitting in the 4th round and he's my number 2, maybe even my number 3 wide receiver, I'm liking that very much. He's not going to have a ton of competition for targets. This Matthew Stafford back thing, we're going to be dealing with that. You got to remember, because part of the appeal for me with a guy like Davante Adams has been loving that Stafford was going to be the one throwing him the ball. Stafford dealing with a little bit of a back ailment, but he's a tough guy, and he'll play through it as much as he can. That's what we're hearing, and there's still time. It seems like with the amount of information that's starting to come out from camps and everything, you would think that the season is starting tomorrow. We've got a full month plus before the season begins, and a lot can change with that. So again, differences of opinions right there. Is he an active target of Jeff's? He is not. No. Is he a target of mine? He is, but I'm not expecting some amazing top 5 finish or anything like that. Top 10 finish, I'm not expecting that. But for a 4th round price point, I'm totally fine with that. I do not think that Davante Adams is necessarily washed right there. So those are just some opinions there. And just again, with me, I know I've talked a lot about Davante Adams. I've ended up with a lot of him so far. I just like him. He just seems safe to me. The volume to me is going to be there, whether Puka's on the field or not. I'm just not expecting him to have this amazing, crazy ceiling. If I'm building heavy on running backs, or if I'm going elite tight end to start, and now I don't have receivers and I'm reaching that 4th round, then maybe I take a little bit of a bigger swing there. But in a lot of drafts, I'm finding myself by the time I get to Adams with at least one receiver, just like in our mock draft that we did a few months ago at fantasyguru.com. And when you become part of the Elite Mafia, you could get access to even that too. It's funny how thought process draft demand changes in just a couple of months. That's why we say that you have your advantages when you draft early, but then there are those other disadvantages too, like someone gets hurt and you just drafted. Oh crap, this sucks, just invested. Should have maybe waited the extra few weeks right there. And that's why for me, I'm always looking to draft within 10 days before the season begins. That's kind of been my goal. That's been my window. Injuries can still happen. Injuries are going to happen. You have to kind of expect it. Expect that someone on your team is going to get hurt. Keeps you focused more. Because when you're sitting there like a fat cat there, undefeated, you're 4-0, your team hasn't had a blemish just yet. That's how you fall asleep. That's how you miss opportunities to help protect your foundation on the waiver wire. So to me, always thinking, well, there's always a chance that someone on your team is going to get hurt. It just keeps you with that chip on your shoulder, and it keeps you focused right there. Beyond looking at targets in general, I also, and we have to look at red zone targets too, players that were targeted very heavily in the red zone last year, like Drake London, targeted very heavily. There's a lot of excitement surrounding Drake London. I brought him up before. Going in the middle of the 2nd round, very excited about that target. Had him last year too. And when you're looking at the receiving core for the Atlanta Falcons, there's not really much that's different. There's not much of a threat for him there. Whether or not Kyle Pitts is going to become more of a thing, to me, that doesn't change Drake London. Drake London was a big-time red zone target. Even if Michael Penix plans to try to get Kyle Pitts a little bit more active in there, not going to change my thought process regarding Drake London. And I think Drake London, you talk about somebody else who, yeah, Michael Penix. Now we're going to get to see this guy, what he can really do over a longer period of time. But Drake London, I think, is going to be totally fine with that. I really do like where he's going. And personally, I like that we don't have to necessarily spend a 1st round pick in 12-team leagues. You're in a 14-team league, he's going to go right there on that wheel. But the red zone love and focus that Drake London got from the Falcons last year was absolutely insane. And even if he gets targeted a little bit less, still seeing him have that overwhelming percentage compared to the rest of his team last year, that's something that's very appealing and something that we have to take with us to our fantasy football drafts. So when looking at Drake London, he had 24 red zone targets last year. Other players that had top red zone targets: Jamar Chase, 35, St. Brown, 31, Justin Jefferson, 25. Adams, remember, on a different team, that's something we have to take into consideration, 24. T. Higgins there too at 24. And that's someone I want to ask Rich Maletto about, because for those especially that like to stack in fantasy football drafts, and I've talked about stacking on multiple streams here, and I don't necessarily go in with a very tight agenda to my fantasy football drafts. Okay, I've got that 1st overall pick. I know I have that going in. I am going to make sure that I target both Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. I still want that open train of thought right there. It does protect your investment, but it could do you in to at the same time if something happens to, let's say, Joe Burrow, potentially. So you have to know what you're doing going in. But that expensive 3-person stack right there, if you're going after a T. Higgins, you're going to be spending up for that stack. Probably if you're looking at that, you're going to be looking at spending 3 of your first 4 picks on Bengals players between Chase, Higgins, and Burrow. Higgins is going right there inside that top 30 I'm seeing over recent draft boards. So you are seeing him go in that 3rd round. The targets are there. They're going to have to throw this defense not better. So it's going to be the offense that's going to have to keep them not only in games, but also keep them ahead too. So they are going to be throwing a lot. I don't love, and I've mentioned this on this show, I do not love the draft capital being spent on Joe Burrow right now, especially if you're comparing him to some of those other quarterbacks, also known as the elite tier. And by the way, when talking about those quarterbacks, I'm talking about Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. So those 5 right there that are going between rounds 3 and 4, right there, if I'm going to invest into someone, I'm going to need them to also have that rushing, I don't like to use the word upside, but I'm going to use it here, that rushing upside too, or that rushing part of their game that helps add on and tack on those points. Joe Burrow doesn't really have that. And so that's why for me, I'm totally fine with going, hey, number 1 overall pick, Jamar Chase, that's fine, but not necessarily locking him in with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow falls a little bit. I feel comfortable in my other spots. Then I'll be open to it. But for those that are planning on stacking Bengals, it is going to be the most expensive, if not the most expensive stack right there. So T. Higgins going as a solidified 3rd round pick. Jonnu Smith being off the Miami Dolphins, who just continue to lose pieces. And by the way, with the Bengals today, or a little bit earlier, releasing Zach Moss. And I think that there was a little bit of concern from some whether or not Zach Moss would be eating into Chase Brown at all. And we saw what happened last year, of course, with Zach Moss's involvement. But, I mean, they still have P. Ryan there to help out with pass catching and everything. I wasn't worried about Brown either way, but Zach Moss released by the Bengals earlier today. So opening up that running back room a little bit, but P. Ryan still hanging out right there. Other wide receivers, by the way, that are going in that 3rd round area that I'm looking. JSN, that's one where I loved JSN last year, but I loved him as an 8th round pick. Thought it would be better than it was a couple of years ago. Weren't running him right. That was often seen, and there's not a lot I take from beat writers and reporters anymore. And by the way, our analysts do a much better job on trying to get the fantasy angle anyway. But one of the things I kept reading a couple of years ago was that there were certain routes that he was not running that could get him the ball. And then last year, we saw him a lot better. Now you're looking at a Seattle team, with no more Metcalf. You've got the oft-injured Cooper Kupp there, who, by the way, you talk about cheap wide receivers. You don't have to really spend anything for Cooper Kupp. And this is what I was talking about before. Cooper Kupp is going right inside the top 100. That's about a 9th round pick for him. A 9th round pick. Cooper Kupp plays 5 games and goes down. Easy to replace on your team. Very easy to replace. The targets are going to be there for both of these guys. Very easy to replace. And so I'm fine with Cooper Kupp. So he always gets hurt. But that's one thing when you're spending a 1st or 2nd or 3rd round pick on a player. It's another thing when you're not even paying starters price for him. He's going solidly in the 9th round. He's able to get himself open. He plays 5 games. He plays 8 games. It would suck for your team if he was exploding and then he did the Cooper Kupp thing of getting hurt just when you need him the most. But that's why having a guy like that still would be hitting value and doesn't cost a lot. And I'm telling you, you want to talk about receivers that are going to go for single digits. Cooper Kupp, this isn't the same Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is going to go for under $10 in $200 budget leagues. Maybe except for the ones that are located in Seattle with all the Seahawks fans. But in a lot of leagues, you're going to see that Cooper Kupp might even go for $5 or fewer. I say that because that is an example of how value in auctions is just there. You don't think about it. You really don't. It's very different thinking about it from an auction standpoint than a snake draft standpoint. There are just a ton that go for under $10, under $5. And tomorrow, you're going to be AP Calc auction sessions. Make sure you're in class. Make sure you bring a snack. Keep the cell phones off and your volumes off on your pagers if that's still a thing, because finite math with auctions was last week. We're going AP Calc, though, tomorrow when it comes to fantasy football in auction strategy. Talking more wide receivers here, let's bring on our guest of the day. It is Rich Maletto, the Fantasy Bosco, and make sure you do not follow at Fantasy Bosco, but do follow all of his work at fantasyguru.com, the good old FG. What's going on, Rich? How you doing?
Not much. Sean's upset that I keep telling people not to follow me on X. I think he's just mad because the NASCAR week we had, but he keeps suggesting I should change that.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Rich, before we get into wide receivers, because you and Sean Engel, you handle, and of course the Marlin too, Mark Hogan, you handle our racing coverage at fantasyguru.com.
Yes, sir.
And we had a conversation, I want to say it was about 1 year ago at this point. And we were in Canton, Ohio at the Hall of Fame at the Expo. We were talking about being a betting analyst in this space and how it's very easy for people to start hating. More importantly, it's very easy for you to start hating on yourself, but just sticking with it, Rich. And that's what you've done when it comes to at least the racing sector. Over the last year, you've taken a step back to try to leave yourself more avail of bets that could be out there and not only looking for those deep plus money bets. Tell us how you and Sean Engel claimed victory last week in a big way.
So, yeah, I am finding that fans that bet on NASCAR are a little more appreciative of the sweat, so to speak. Like, they know it's racing, and it's almost like they get just as excited being in the hunt with a long shot than they are, just kind of putting money out there. But I have tried to really incorporate more of the top fives, top tens, even if I really like the guy, drinking the juice a little bit. Like we talked about that day. You and Sandro really said, hey, we have a boss that appreciates that. So don't run from those. Don't force yourself into looking for only the plus money bets, which is what I would do. Is I would wait and I would just, I do like this plus money bet. I don't want actions on these other guys. I like these other bets, but I don't like the fact they're minus odds, and I try to get away from that. Sean's kind of taken another level. He's been parlaying it a little bit, and he did take our bets on that Thursday to parlay. But we always have a handful of winners we push out there. On Thursday on the podcast, I suggested Bubba Wallace is what we call our McChicken bet. Whatever you would pay for a McChicken, go ahead and throw it out there on the bet because it's a long shot. That was 30-1. But then I said, hey, bet Denny Hamlin minus 140 for a top 5. Bet Alex Bowman at plus 120, I think it was, for a top 10. Ryan Preece was a little longer at 3-1 at plus 300. And I think Bubba was plus 160. Maybe it was minus 160. But something like that, and they all hit. And the other thing I've tried to do, Fensty, based on that discussion, was scale back. Try to be more laser hunting. On Saturday, there wasn't a bunch of top 10s or top 5s I wanted to bet. They were a little longer, but I said, look, I got 2 guys I like for a win today. Connor Zilich at 5-1 and Sam Mayer you can find between 9 to 10-1. They finished 1-2. So, I mean, you can't really do better than that, and that's just what we're trying to do. And I'm trying to drink a juice a little bit and get those top 5s and top 10s. And, like we've talked about, if I came to you, and Jeff uses this example all the time, if I came to you and said, Fensty, give me $100, I will promise you a 40% return tomorrow at this time. I will give you $140 tomorrow. I promise you. You'd be like, okay, that works for me. I'm good with that. Well, what's that? You're drinking juice to get something like that, right? That's a minus 160 type bet, right? So why are we not going and betting these? I mean, this goes to exactly what you and Sandro were saying and teeing off of what Jeff had been saying.
Right. And the reason is, Rich, and part of it is because, I mean, look at YouTube, look at TV, look at the advertisements. It's selling a dream that barely exists. And they it's the $1 million dream. It's when the rise of DFS was happening. One of the big things and the big selling points, especially during football season, was the Millie Maker. Oh, everyone was all over the Millie Maker. And I'm sitting there in studio at the SiriusXM studios producing Jeff's show. And Jeff's like, what are you doing? Why are you putting $100 worth of lineups in this that's eating your money? It's eating your money. Slower gains, cash games. No. Can't do that. Have to get 1,000x return. Otherwise, none of this is worth it. And that mentality sucks.
I agree, man. I agree. Ironically, I can't seem to have any success in cash games in NASCAR. I don't know what it is. I have better success with the GPPs. I have no idea why that is. I don't know if it's how I build lineups. I don't know if it's how I chase the points. I have yet to figure that out because for as close as I get or as often as I'm in the top 20, top 50, top 10, and it's not every week, but I mean, I'm up, I don't know, 2.5 times money this year, something like that. You would think cash games would be easier. And I've got to do some homework over the next, 12 months, trying to figure out, because I love the idea of doubling up each week. Yeah. If I can double up 3 times out of 4 in a month, that's big. Right now, I'm cashing top 20% on a regular basis, but Fancy, I'm not even doubling up, right? I mean, It's, after you figure you do 2 or 3 lineups, even on the cheap side, and only 1 or 2 cash, you're losing a third. Maybe you're doubling up later, but you lost a third here. You know what I mean? So I would love, because I'm a better cash game player for football. So I don't, like I said, there's some sort of weird disconnect for me mentally, and I don't know what.
Dude, it's not just you, man. I have an easier time. Yes, I'm reading Jeff Manns' content, of course, but I have an easier time this past year cashing in football cash than basketball cash. The pay lines would just be so big and it would be hard to cash. So I'll say this, as someone who, I would say when I started at Fantasy Guru a couple years ago, I was always Mr. Cash Games Cash. Now I'm starting to just be like, hey, whatever you want to play is fine. Go play those GPPs. Single entry only. I do not play in multi-entry contests ever.
There's no money in it for him, but I wish that was, Jeff always does the Jeff and Phil and Sandro do the whole top 5 thing. And one time they were asking about things for DFS. And I was like, I think it should be single entry only. I think all contests for DFS should be single entry only. I think you invite too many sharks, you separate. It's kind of like when you go to a poker room at a casino, not all the tables are no limit, right? Right. There's a reason for that. And some of them have a max buy-in. You can go back and buy in as many times as you want, but you can't sit down with more than $250 in chips at the time or something like that. And the idea behind that is to kind of level the playing field, because once you get a bully at the table with 10 times what everybody else has, there's only so much they can do. And maybe the DFS sites want the sharks to have more success. I don't know. But if you really want to say it's wide open and anyone can do it, I feel like it really needs to be single entry only. You get your one shot in this contest. We'll have multiple contests, but you get one shot in this contest.
I can't tell you, and I'd have to go through my log and everything. I can't tell you the last time I played in a multi-entry contest. It just
I won't do
like
it.
It's you are attacking. You're attacking the sharks. You are swimming. You are knowing. You're seeing the fins that the sharks are there, and you're like, I'm going to jump in. I won't get eaten. You're going to get eaten. Lineups are made with singular changes in multi-entry contests where the people that are in those contests, they're hedging. They're not entering one lineup. They're entering 5, 7 lineups in these contests.
If I enter one, Finsty, it is specifically for a hedge lineup I want to build. It's because I feel like I have too much exposure to something and I want to differentiate where I didn't get a little exposure. And so then I'll go find a 3 or 5 entry contest, because usually by that time there's not a lot of options. And I will do one lineup. Out of the multi-entry, I'll do one lineup, and it'll be a hedge lineup. And the ironic part about that is when I'm off and that hedge lineup hits, it's funny to me because I put the one lineup in as a hedge against all of those sharks. And when it cashes and I get my money back, I just kind of laugh. And when I don't, I knowingly entered that contest just kind of, I don't want to say throwing the money away, but it was a hedge against myself at the time. And it was minimal investment. I just want the exposure to see. And I know that if it hits, it's going to take a lot of luck to actually be worthwhile. But I'm fine with it because this is my hedge, whatever. I hope it makes the Sharks eat their teeth, right? Because I want it to be like, who's the clown that threw this lineup together? You know what I mean? So I'm right with you, man. And single entry only. And the thing is contest selection matters. Don't do your lineups, but enter the contest midweek. Because if you wait till game day or race day, you're not left with a lot of options.
No, you're not. And look, we're all guilty of that, but you're really not. And it's those single entry contests that disappear first. Unless you're willing to spend $100. The expensive ones are still there, but those $5-10 entry contests 2 hours before, or even an hour before game time on Sundays, they're going to be gone for the most part by then. You're going to have to spend a little bit more here. Let's talk a little bit about receivers, Rich, because I'm trying to figure out with certain teams with whether or not to invest in certain receivers. And let's start with the Miami Dolphins here, because there's no more Jonnu Smith. And we just saw how active he was. I was going over yesterday the target volume he had on Miami. Now he's gone, no longer there in Pittsburgh. So I have to ask you this, because we know that Tyreek Hill has had his, little health getting dinged up and everything like that. Waddle too. Where are you at with these guys? Because it's not like you have to spend a first or second round pick on Tyreek Hill. You're looking at a third round pick. And then even for Waddle, you're looking in that fifth or sixth area. The demand is just not there for the price.
It's not there because the production wasn't there. And I know Jonnu took a lot of that away. But if you go back 2 years, it was a lot of the same headaches. Whether it was Waddle or Hill, I would rather invest in Waddle at the cheaper cost than Hill, simply because if Hill misses time, I think Waddle gains the most. Although I would say don't forget about Malik Washington, but I don't think Malik Washington's much of a thing without some sort of injury to Hill or Waddle's, probably more specifically Hill. I don't know if the Dolphins are down at tight end. I mean, they haven't had a tight end until last year that did the things that they wanted from that tight end, Why can I not remember the guy? The guy that kind of – no, not Gesicki. After Gesicki. Begins with a P, I swear. Dylan – oh, man. I'd have to go look it up, and I can't because I'm on my phone. Smythe.
Okay, Durham Smythe. Okay.
Durham Smythe, yes. He kind of showed a little here and there. The tight end has some work. They've got work to do. Maybe if Noah Fant signs there, maybe there's something to that, because I think he'd be a fairly decent fit for that offense. But I got to tell you, overall, Finsty, I'm not really looking to invest in the Dolphins much, period. A-Chain is intriguing, but I have concerns. I'd much rather take a shot, say, with Barkley or Genty than A-Chain, personally, even though I think the volume's there. I really don't want any action on Tyreek Hill. I just don't. I'd rather get Malik Washington for free and see what happens. I'm not sold. Tua stays upright, healthy.
That's the big problem, Rich. He has no protection going into this year.
Which is why I don't like Achane. And, I heard one of the radio analysts say we get too much in the weed when we start looking at the offensive lines. And I disagree with that. Because if you go back at the end of the year, and I understand we're prognosticating the offensive lines, but if you go at the end of the year and look at the offensive lines that hit the metrics and score well, the fantasy production was there across the board. If I'm a coach and a GM, I'm not filling quarterback first like you see these teams doing. I'm starting from the trenches and working my way out. I want to protect my quarterback and I want to bring pressure. If you do those two things, I'm telling you, you can do just about anything else you want. You can find the players that fit your scheme. You can find the running back that is a one-cut guy, a power guy, whatever you want to run. You can find a quarterback that's not seeing ghosts then because they're protected. And it's amazing. Mediocre quarterbacks, when they don't see ghosts, amazingly perform. I mean, not to be mean, but Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins, you guys have been top 8 fantasy quarterbacks. Nobody likes you. I don't have a problem with you as long as you get protection. That means the receivers on the deep routes get more play. How is Tyreek Hill going to stretch the field if Tua doesn't have any time?
Right. It's going to be tough.
It's going to be very tough. So, and what do you do with the quarterbacks behind him? Nobody has any faith in Zach Wilson or Quinn Ewers. I kind of like Quinn Ewers personally, but I get the questions. So I'll be frank, Vincey. I'm kind of out on the Dolphins.
No, and that's why I bring them up, man, because again, there's a lot of negatives surrounding this team. I don't have any of these guys yet, except for Achane, who I got in our mock. But Achane, I'm still a little bit open for. But look, if you're telling me, I mean, I don't see by that time, I don't see that really being a debate. You brought up Genty, you brought up Barkley. I'm thinking you're talking multiple picks going between these three guys here, between those two versus Achane. But I was sitting there, I remember at the end, towards it, and I was picking right before you in our mock draft. And I was like, do I go receiver here? And I ended up going Achane and Henry for different reasons and thinking that both will get volume, Achane getting the combo volume, Henry getting the carry volume with amazing O-line protection around him. So that's the only situation where I got Achane in, Rich. So I'm still trying to figure out whether or not, because I haven't been in the spot where I'm like, I'll go draft the Tyreek Hill here. So I'm still waiting on that. Now, if I'm sitting there at the
why
end,
would you?
Right.
Why would you? Because in that third round, Kyron Williams has been there. Kenneth Walker has been there. I mean, you're talking about some primo running backs that are there in the third round, and we're not even talking about some of the receivers. You know, the only reason I mentioned Genty and Barkley, I've seen a couple of drafts lately where Achane is right in that same group with those guys.
Really?
But to your point, I honestly, I think I'd rather have Kyron Williams than Achane and take a shot on Hunter backing him up, and I can do that around later, right? So I'm with you. For where Tyreek Hill is going, he's going with the receivers that people have major question marks on, right?
Big time.
I mean, I'm trying to think of the ADP around Tyreek Hill's, but
I've got some right here. I've got like 50,000 boards. It's what I feel like I'm a stockbroker now, Rich. You know,
you're a fantasy stockbroker.
Fantasy stockbroker Fensty right here. So let's just play a little fun game here. Here's who's going around Tyreek Hill, Rich. Oh, here's another player that I've asked you about before, and I'll ask you again since it's been a few weeks since we talked. Right by Tyreek Hill, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Other wide receivers that are going by him too. Guys like T. Higgins, who you know is getting a lot of target volume.
See, I'll go
Marvin Harrison right there too. What do you think about that group?
I'd rather go him. If I was going to go receiver there, it would be.
I think Rich is breaking up just a little bit here. So we're going to get Rich back on here. It's freezing just a little bit, but Rich brings up a great point. And it's a fantastic point of look at the receivers that are going around there. Questionable guys here. JSN, I've talked about whether or not, because I've seen him in drafts go right at the tail end of the second round too. The targets will be there, but I'm probably steering away. Tyreek Hill right there too. And then T. Higgins, I've gotten none of these guys. I've gotten Harrison. Do I feel like Harrison's going to completely explode? Unsure. It's hard for me to think that, but can he have another season like he did? Is he worth it at the end of the third round, maybe even sneaking into the fourth and second round last year? I think so. Let's welcome back Rich Maletto from fantasyguru.com hanging out with me. So Rich, that's your area right there. When it comes to the third round, you're looking at JSN, T. Higgins, Marvin Harrison.
So I'm on the T. Higgins train. I think he's borderline wide receiver one when he plays. The problem is he gets hurt. I get that, but I'll weather that storm because he's got Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, right? So I feel like I know I'm getting with Higgins, and I like the high volume floor ceiling, right? Jeff's got me a little more nervous on JSN. Where does he fit in with Cooper Kupp, playing out of the slot, playing outside? I like Ohio State receivers, so I'd roll that dice. I'm with you. I'm in lockstep with you on Marvin Harrison. I'll take a chance there. Do I have a lot of faith? No, but I would much rather gamble on a prototypical young receiver trending up than a dysfunctional small receiver with an injury history that if he's
right. No, I hear you there, man. I hear you there. I'll say this too. I mean, then there's another situation too, and this is what we've walked into now a lot over the last few years, and that's rather than your holdout agreements, now you're seeing certain players hold in, like Terry McLaurin. Yeah, he's reporting to camp, but now holding in, that's great that he's training, but the money factor for it is huge for Terry McLaurin because he's seeing what DK Metcalf is getting paid, wants to be paid more than that. He's also, by the way, where we saw Courtland Sutton get over a $90 million extension too. So I'm sure seeing the market be what it is and a lot of money being thrown around, Terry McLaurin knows that this Commanders team is in position to contend once again, and he wants more than DK Metcalf money. And Rich, it's a good time to ask you here. We know how good Terry McLaurin is. We know how solid this Commanders unit is. But at the same time, do you worry a little bit about the contract situation and this hold-in becomes a holdout bleeding into the season? It normally doesn't. But look, Terry McLaurin holding strong on a competitive team here.
Trey Hendrickson's in the same boat. I don't know what to do because the NFL, something has changed. And I know the NFL made some policy changes and things like that, but we are seeing way more guaranteed money, right? Like, I think that matters as a part of Courtland Sutton's contract, for example. 4 years with that much guaranteed. I would say then their hopes for Pat Bryant is a 2-year project, I think is where I would stand with that stance. So I'd be in on Sutton. I think Sutton's undervalued. You talk about Tyreek Hill. I'd rather have Courtland Sutton. I can get 2 rounds later.
Agreed. Right? 1,000 times agreed.
I don't know, man, because honestly, what I'm more fearful about is Jaden Daniels. He's not getting that practice in. And he kind of likes having his guy. So who's his guy without Terry? And now with Terry's at practice, so are we getting a taste of, they're going to get on the same page and then Terry's sitting out or he's got some sort of weird injury? I don't know. And I get why Terry's saying he wants DK money. DK was overpaid, though.
Yeah.
I would argue.
Yes.
So find another comp, I guess would be my advice to Terry. I'm nervous on it, man. And I don't want to say we can't draft these guys, but this goes back probably 8, 9, 10 years ago when camp was longer. I never had much success taking chances on guys that weren't in camp for the bulk of it. Whether injuries came up, whether they just got a slow start, whether they weren't in game shape, whatever it is, I had a policy at one point that I just don't draft the holdouts. Because when I did, it didn't bode well for me. And when I didn't, I never felt like it really burned me that badly. I'm more worried about my Jaden Daniels shares more than anything at this point because the Commanders were going in the right direction. And Terry's a big part of it. And I hate to say it, the Commanders have to find a
They do. I'm with you there, Rich. They got to find a way to pay this guy here. And here's the thing with Terry McLaurin, too. The thing is, the difference between his situation and let's just say someone like a Jawan Jennings is draft capital. Because for draft capital for Jawan Jennings, way later than Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, we're looking at this point, late 3rd, early 4th round for Terry McLaurin here. And so that's why you got to be careful, especially in this situation, because like we said, we were worried about Jamar Chase and it ended up at the 11th hour working out. But at the same time, you just never know with that. So if you don't want to deal with that, you want to make it someone else's problem. I agree with Rich. Maybe investing in someone a little bit cheaper would be the best part there. By the way, someone else that I notice is moving up and down. I'll say this to end right here. Stephon Diggs, and I know that he's a little bit banged up coming off of last year too, but love me some Drake May. Love me the improvements there. Don't see him having a ton of competition for targets right now, the draft capital being what it is in that 8th round. So probably going to move up here unless he gets sidetracked or an injury happens, something happens, probably going to move up just a little bit. But those are a few receivers, and I was talking about before that I noticed were just moving up draft boards here. A few other names that I'll just give that I've seen move up when it comes to draft stock here. I've seen Garrett Wilson move up a little bit. I've also seen Jacoby Myers, who you're chasing the target volume at this point. Fine with that. Also, Deebo Samuel, because of this McLaurin situation, moving up too. I mentioned Stephon Diggs, and then Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden too. Other guys that I'm seeing moved up as this Royal Rumble for the Packers receiving core. We'll have to see who ends up winning that Rumble and gets the most targets right there. I'm going to be back with you tomorrow at noon Eastern. Going to be a little bit of a shorter show, but AP Calc Advanced Auction Strategy in auction, how to bid up your friends, how to protect your team while bidding up your friends, and how to get the players that you want. I thank Rich Maletto from fantasyguru.com for stopping by, and I thank all of you for hanging out with me. I'll be back with you tomorrow, same time, same place, same channel, Fantasy Sports Daily, right here on the Elite Plus Network, powered by fantasyguru.com.